Hello, Mishpacha, it's Courtney, America's Jewish mother, and I'm here today with a chatty discussion video. So yesterday, Lukash, at A Cruel Reader's Thesis, made a very interesting video about how fast he reads and whether or not one should actually care about the speed at which one reads. And he posed a number of questions, including how fast do you read? How many pages per hour do you read? Do you want to read faster? Are you frustrated by how slowly you read? And do you think it would be more beneficial to read more quickly? And in his discussion, Lukash made a number of good points. So he first said that his reading speed varies by the format and genre of book and also the time period of publication. For me, I would say that it's a similar thing, right? If I'm reading something that's a cozy mystery or like a spy thriller book that's quite plot heavy, I can get through that a lot faster in terms of reading than I can a novel by Toni Morrison or something by Tolstoy, or something that just requires more sort of thought and concentration. And then similarly, if I'm reading nonfiction and it's narrative nonfiction, I tend to get through that a lot faster than I would through dense, academic, dry sort of material. And Lukash also talked about what he calls mind wandering while he's reading, and that happens to me too. Usually more often than not, I would say that happens to me when I'm reading fiction. A lot of times I'll be reading fiction and then I will, sort of hit on something in the story that makes me think about something in my own life, and then I'll sort of go down a mental rabbit hole and get all up in my feelings about things, which is one of the things I actually love about books, is sort of ability to relate them to your own life and feel all of your feelings. So that also happens to me. Lukash also mentioned that when he speeds up his reading, it takes away all of the joy from reading, and reading suddenly feels like a chore, and he doesn't process things as well. I feel like that might be true of me to a certain extent. I don't know that it necessarily takes as much enjoyment out. I do think that it does somewhat affect my ability to process the reading, but not always. He also talks about why people are interested in reading more quickly. So he brought up things like, doing weekly wrap-up videos. If you have a booktube channel, that makes you sort of feel pressured to read more, so you have more stuff to talk about. The Goodreads goals for the year, having just a big TBR in general and wanting to get to everything. And then I saw a few people who watched this video yesterday added some additional suggestions in the comments about why people might want to read more quickly, including having procrastinated on a reading for, say, like a book club discussion and then needing to get through it in a hurry, setting just a monthly TBR at the beginning of the month and wanting to get through all the books on your TBR, participation in readathons or read-alongs, or just wanting to read as much stuff as possible, since eventually we're all going to shuffle off this mortal coil and can't read after you're dead, at least not to my knowledge, but what do I know, I've never been dead. So anyway, so I thought those were all interesting suggestions and thoughts about why people would want to read more quickly. In terms of things like Friday Reads, I definitely feel like since joining BookTube, it's kind of pressured me to read more books at one time so that I have more things to talk about in my Friday Reads videos, or if you don't do those, some kind of weekly wrap-up video. In terms of my Goodreads goal for the year, I really don't feel like that's affected my desire to want to read more quickly or anything like that. And I'll tell you why. Because at the beginning of the year when I set my Goodreads goal, I thought about how many books I had read last year, which was 55. And so I thought, okay, well, I should, slightly up that goal. So I upped it to 60, which I thought was very reasonable because it only works out to like 5 books a month. Probably sometime over the summer, I got to 60 books, or I got close to 60 books, and then I upped my goal to 75. Then I got closer to 75, then I upped it to 90. and then I upped it to 100, and so I've now surpassed having read 100 books this year, but I'm not going to up my goal anymore because it just seems sort of silly at this point. Because, you know, we're already in November, and I think when I met this goal, it was maybe like at the end of October or something like that, and it seems silly to up my goal again just for the end of the year. So I'm just like, you know what, okay, my original goal was 60, I'm over 100 now, so you know, everything after that is just icing. So I would say in terms of setting a Goodreads goal for the year, I know people like to challenge themselves with things like that, but I would just set it at a reasonable number, and then if you want to increase it later, you can always increase it later, you know? If you feel like a reasonable goal is for you to get through 4 books a month, then set it at like 48 or 50. If you feel like you want to get through a book a week, set it at 52. If you want to read 5 books a month, set it at 60. But something that's like an actual reasonable goal for you to meet, and then that way you have some wiggle room in case, you know, something comes up that stifles your reading, which, I mean, in 2020, a lot of things that have come up that have stifled people's reading in one way or another. So I would suggest that. And then also Lukáš brings up the question of ultimately, is it even worthwhile to read more quickly? And he says, he suggests reading at the pace that will allow you to get what you want out of the reading. And I think that's probably good advice. So if you're a person who mostly reads for pleasure, escapism, enjoyment, things like that, and you're reading a lot of, say, fantasy or science fiction or manga or spy thriller books or cozy mysteries or whatever, like things that are very sort of plot heavy, and that for me at least, like, make me just read faster because I'm not really worried about absorbing the aesthetics or thinking about character motivations or growth or development or things like that as much as I'm focused on plot in genre fiction like that, then yeah, you know, by all means, you know, read books that you can get through quickly so you can read more of them, you know. But if you care about books from a certain time period, especially time periods that are older than about 50 years or so, that are written in language that Lukáš also mentions this in his video, that are sometimes sort of stilted to a modern day reader, or reads, you know, just more difficult and challenging to read because the colloquialisms and language of an older generation is somewhat unfamiliar to the modern ear, and we just don't process it as quickly as we would process books written in more sort of contemporary language. So if you care about stuff like that, then, you know, make that your focus and be okay with, you know, only reading, say, like 10 pages an hour or 20 pages an hour or whatever. Oh, by the way, I don't think I ever addressed this. So 2 of the questions Lukáš asked in his video are how fast do you read and how many pages per hour do you read? I honestly have no idea. So I tried last night to sort of time myself, and I was able to get through 24 pages of a Toni Morrison novel and a short story by Chekhov that was about 20 pages long in like a little over 45 minutes, maybe 48 minutes or something like that. But I was also like specifically just focused on reading, and I was trying to get through that stuff, and I think I would not necessarily read as fast if I, you know, we're not like, yes, I'm gonna sit here right now and just read this book for an hour or whatever, you know. So I think the circumstances kind of affect my reading speed as well. Like if I'm very sort of goal focused in my reading and I'm like, I want to get through this, you know, 30-page chapter or 40-page short story or whatever, versus if, you know, I've just sat down with my morning coffee and I just want to leisurely read for an hour or something like that. You know, like this morning I was reading Ezra Klein's Why We're Polarized, which I quite enjoy, and it does read fairly quickly, but I've also sort of backed off on it a little bit because I'm trying to make it last longer and savor it a little bit more, and because I was, you know, sort of doing other things in between, and you know, I had to feed the daughter breakfast, and, you know, got up and poured myself another cup of coffee, and you know, messed around with this and that a little bit, had a little mind wandering thrown in there, right? It probably took me like, probably like an hour and a half just to read about 30 pages of that book, which you know, is kind of a long time, considering that, again, just last night it took me, you know, less than 50 minutes total to read about 45, not quite 45 pages of works by, you know, authors that are you know, they're fairly challenging for literary fiction, right? Toni Morrison and Anton Chekhov. So that was a little interesting. But yeah, I think it just ultimately comes down to read at the pace you want to read at that will enable you to get something satisfying out of your reading. And yeah, like Lukáš says, we can't all be Steve Donahue and read 1,000+ books a year. Like, it's just not in the cards. And you know, you can take your Evelyn Wood speed reading course or whatever, or you can listen to audiobooks at 2.5 speed, or can you even put audiobooks up to 2.5 speed? I have no idea. I think I've only ever upped them to 1.25 personally. But you know, you can do that, especially if you're a very sort of goal-focused person, and especially if you're trying to meet a monthly TBR that you set for yourself, or you're trying to up the number of books that you've read for the year on Goodreads. But you know, I think ultimately you do want to consider what it is that you are aiming to get out of reading. Because if it's just a numbers game, then sure, read as fast as you want. You know, stop sub-vocalizing, up the speed on your audiobooks, etc., etc. But, you know, if you're aiming to get sort of pleasure and enjoyment and sort of learning or challenge of any kind out of your reading, then I would say it doesn't matter so much how fast you read, and you should just be okay with the speed at which you read. So yeah, those are my sort of rambly thoughts about Lukáš's video, but I am glad that Lukáš made that video because I think it opened up some interesting avenues of discussion. I will leave a link to his video down below, and if you have any comments on how quickly you personally read, or whether you have any frustrations that you don't read faster, or whether you're totally fine and you've just accepted this is the pace at which I read and I'm not going to worry about it, please feel free to let me know down in the comments below. So thank you for watching. I hope y'all are doing well and staying healthy. I hope you're doing good reading whatever you're reading, and until next time, would it kill you to call your mother?